Hello.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. How have you been?
Very well, thank you.
Well, before we continue, this is the first ever podcast that we are working into. This has made it out of the group chat. It took a while. No, it didn't actually.
It didn't.
It took a very short span of time from planning to actually eventuating into us sitting here. Tell us about the journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's a couple of weeks to come out of the group chat to where we are now, but I think this has been on the back burner for a couple of months since we had the conversation about doing a podcast, particularly around failure.
Yeah.
And if you remember, a couple of months ago, I was a guest on the show whilst you were still at Fiji Television, and we started to talk about failure. And it just really triggered something, I think. And you said something to me during the break that someone should do a podcast. I haven't heard a lot of people talk about failure, and that it would be a great source of encouragement for people if we were to start talking and have very candid conversations about failure and how people respond to failure and how failure is an integral part of success.
Why do you think the reel went viral? Everyone started sharing it. I know that there were people in my life that actually called me up and said, we were really interested, we're really interested in this particular topic. Why do you think that resonated with people?
I think it resonated with people because we have a very negative perspective of failure. And I think we've been raised to look at failure as something that we need to kind of shy away from. And if you're a failure, then you kind of have given up on life and people have given up on you. And I think what the message did was bring people hope that failure can actually help you get to where you want to be in life.
Wow.
If you see failure as something that can help you, as opposed to seeing it as something that limits you. And I think that was what made the clip go viral, because people suddenly started to see this opportunity to embrace failure and to, as you're going through life, when you have failures, that you look at it as a stepping stone to getting you to where you want to be in life, and not as something that you need to shy away from. So having the courage to embrace failure and looking at failure as a friend on the journey, because it's come to teach you something. And it's only when you embrace what the failure comes to teach you that you can then move on to the next thing that life has for you. And I think that was what really resonated with people. I was a little bit overwhelmed as well when it went viral, and I thought, wow, that's a message that people need to hear. And the fact that it went viral really spoke loudly to me about the message that we need to continue to share with the world, to encourage people. Failure is a part of the journey. How you respond to failure will determine whether you grow or whether you stay back, and whether you limit yourself and stay in a place of failure.
Now I'm interested to know what you have in your hand right now. The book that you're reading.
So, as you know, I'm a student of leadership, and I'm a certified executive program leader with the John Maxwell team, with the Maxwell Leadership Team. That's one of his books. And the book is Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. And I think, based on the kinds of questions that you ask me and the kind of conversations that we have when we're together, at any given opportunity, it speaks to me of the fact that you're a great leader because you ask the really important questions and you draw out what is in me. And I think that's what's going to make for really an exciting podcast, and which is what makes this series, really exciting because of the kind of questions that you ask.
Wow, thank you very much. I received that with all my heart, and I take it with, with respect, knowing that it's coming from another leader. And I know that there are a lot of things that we're going to be facing in this life. So many things that we're walking into, so many seasons we're walking into, and the fact that we're starting this podcast with this important topic, failure. Now tell us about that. I know that people are dying to know why do you think that it is important for us to start with that? that we're starting off our podcast, and this is going to go on for a few seasons.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's important for us to start our podcast with the word failure?
I think it's really important because we're picking up from something that resonated with so many people. And I think, for someone who's a student of leadership, one of the things that you learn on the journey is that it's all about the people. And so if people are wanting to know more about how to deal with failure, then that's what we will give the people. And I think the importance of us just unpacking this as part of our first series on this podcast is, I'm hoping will help people. And I think that for me is why we're doing the podcast, is to be able to help people on their journey through this thing called life, is to help people reach the success that they aspire to, is to help people achieve the dreams that they have in their hearts. And one of the ways which we can hopefully support them in doing that is bringing these conversations of failure out of where they're usually hidden away into this conversation, and then sharing that with the world in the hope that that will encourage people to navigate failure, embrace failure as part of the journey, and see failure as a friend when you're trying to build your life, and not shy away from it. And I think because our society, we tend to award excellence. We're just coming out of a prize giving season, and there's so much that we're seeing on social media about prizes, people who've been given gold awards, Dux awards, there's so much of that. But what about the ones who didn't make it to that level? How are we paying attention to them? How are we helping them to not see themselves as failures, but to actually see themselves as gifted, but maybe in a different area? And maybe they're not good academically, but that does not mean that they're a write-off. That just means that they need to be given the tools to help them navigate what might be considered to be failure, but they're probably really good at other things. And we know that they're good, probably really good sports people, probably really good with tech, and even behind the camera, but they're not necessarily good academically. So how are we awarding and how are we recognizing the other gifts and talents that exist, and not just academic achievement? Academic achievement is amazing, and let's celebrate all of those who have achieved academically, but let's also celebrate everyone else who may not have achieved academically, but have probably excelled in other areas. So how are we recognizing them not as failures, but as leaders in those other areas?
Okay. Do you think that by talking about failures and the benefit it has on people, in a way people might think that we're glorifying failure? Is that what it is? Is that what we're doing?
As a student of leadership, I glean a lot from leaders who write about these things. And one of Maxwell's books, which is a book which we've unpacked a lot and we've talked about a lot, is the book Failing Forward. And where he talks about the importance of failing first, failing fast, but always failing forward. And just this opportunity where you see failure as something that you embrace. So the question about did you say, are we glorifying failure?
Are we glorifying failure?
We're recognizing that failure is a reality in our journey through life. That no one in this life can avoid failure. Okay. But that we're not glorifying it, but we're recognizing it as a necessary part of the journey towards success.
Wow, that's deep. Now, there's something in the concept note that we were talking about. There's a quote here that I would like to highlight. It says, the difference between average people and achieving people is their perception and response to failure.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
And that's exactly it, So people who achieve, the difference between those who are seen to achieve and those who don't is their response and their perception of failure. Those who see failure as something that you need to shy away from, and so you're always kind of treading carefully. You're not willing to take risks. You hold back when opportunities present themselves. So you remain average. You remain in a place of comfort, but you never quite fully discover the potential that is within you, because you're always holding yourself back. But if your response to life is failure is part of the journey, it's come to teach me something. Let me learn the lesson quickly. Fail first, fail fast, always fail forward. Let me embrace what failure is coming to teach me, and then I can move forward and achieve the level of success that I aspire to achieve. So the difference between those who achieve levels of success, that's what the quote says, is the way that they perceive and respond to failure. And those that choose to remain average because they fear what failure will look like. And so they don't take risks. And so I think everybody who's achieved a certain level of success, whatever success looks like, and success is different for each and every one of us. But if you look at the lives of people who've achieved certain levels of success, you will see that they've navigated very challenging and very difficult times. And they've had to work through those things in order for them to move to where and get to where they are. And that's that quote. It's the way that you perceive failure, and it's the way you see it.
So I think that is what everyone's perception of failure is. It's something that I do not want for myself, something that we've been taught that this is not right. It's something that you would want to detach from. How long did it take for you to actually learn this lesson? Because I know that there are certain instances that happened in your life that you might think that it was a curse, but it ended up being a blessing. If you want to give an example, great, but I'm just saying, if this is something that you've encountered in your life?
Yeah, I'm just going to look at my notes,
go right
because
ahead.
I think I did write down a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. As I reflect on my own journey, and thank you for asking the question, how long did it take for me to realize that failure was a necessary part of the journey? I think it's still something that I'm coming to terms with. I think failure is never something that you kind of wake up and you think, I've got it. I will embrace every failure that comes my way. I think for me, it's been a discovery as I've taken a risk and I've encountered failure. Then I've had to navigate my response to that failure, and then that's what's propelled me forward. So it took me a long while to kind of get to that place. And that's why I'm so grateful to books like Failing Forward, because it gave me the tools that I needed to be able to kind of see this failure as a friend, and not as something that I'm going to cower away and hide in the corner because I've messed up, but to see this as, okay, in a moment of reflection, after I've reflected on this particular experience, what has it come to teach me about myself? What is the emotion that I felt when I went through this particular challenging situation? And how do I use this situation to draw me closer to where I want to be? But the question you asked is, how long did it take you to realize that? That's been part of the ongoing journey of growth for me. It's about learning to embrace the failures as they come. And I think you know this in your head, like you know it from reading, but that doesn't mean that the failures don't surprise you when they show up.
That is true.
So the failures will show up because you're taking risks. And so I hope that I've built up enough resilience and built up enough the ability to be able to think about the failure as it's happening as, okay, what has this come to teach me about myself? What has this come to teach me about the way that I conduct my relationships, for example? What has it come to teach me about who I am at this time? That if if this is no longer serving me and helping me to get to where I want to get to, then I need to change something.
Okay.
So I evaluate the experience through the lens of failure.
Failing backwards and failing forward. Huge difference. Because I feel like people still need to understand, now that we're talking about failure and addressing this issue, people will now understand that we have to treat failure as a friend.
Yeah.
But it's how you treat failure as a friend that is quite important. And I feel like we're leaning more towards that conversation, failing backwards and failing forward, and how you approach failure.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's again, it comes down to the approach. It comes down to the questions that you're asking yourself when you've experienced the failure or when you've experienced a bit of a setback. How do you respond in that moment? How are you going to use that as an opportunity to propel you forward as opposed to it holding you back? And I think, so I was just looking at my notes as you're asking that question, and one of the experiences that I think I really wanted to share, and hopefully this will help people who are watching and listening to us, is how I navigated. So for the benefit of those watching and listening, I recently just completed my second master's degree.
Wow, congratulations.
But I did it by distance learning, and I did it through a university that it is part of the University of London. So it's the School of Oriental and African Studies. And I did it by distance. So I enrolled in my second master's during COVID, because at the time it seemed like a good idea. There wasn't much happening in terms of work. We were all homebound. So I thought, let's take this as an opportunity to kind of upskill myself. So I decided that I would enroll in a second master's degree by distance learning. This university has always been one of these universities that I always wanted to go to, but it was kind of unachievable when I started my journey as through academia when I was much younger. But it seemed like, okay, great opportunity, let's do this. So I'm gonna lean in and I'm gonna try and use this as an opportunity to grow. So I enrolled in the second master's, and then I had to find the money to pay for it because it's expensive and I'm self-funded. So I had to get out a loan to pay for my university, and one module cost £3,000.
Wow.
So that's like 10,000 Fiji dollars, yeah. And then I had to do 4 modules, and at the end of every module, write a 5,000 word essay, and then at the end of the 4 modules, write a 15,000 word dissertation. Now, for those people who've done PhDs, this is probably like nothing to them because they would have done, many more words. But for me, it was the continuous learning whilst I took a risk, and that's what I did by taking on this second master's degree. And then how I navigated that with the work. I was still running the business, still trying to do leadership development training, and still trying to finish this thing. And so the risk for me was, what if I don't finish it? But I put myself out there anyway. And there were times when I'd literally have the essay due next week and I hadn't been able to do much thinking. And it really took a lot out of me. But, when you put yourself out there and you make a commitment to do something for yourself, I owed it to myself to finish it. And so in the midst of everything that was going on, I had to decide, did I want to succeed or did I want to, not hand this thing in? So I would go away, lock myself away for a couple of days, and then hash out this 5,000 word essay in order to hand it in. So I guess I'm sharing that because, for me, the failure was I saw it as part of the journey during that time. And it was incredibly challenging. There were times when I didn't think I had it in me to even write the essay, because academic thinking through an institution like SOAS, which I had decided to go and sign myself up to, where it challenges the thinking of global north and it looks at things through the lens of global south. So I was doing these things, and it required work. And I honestly, at times, didn't have the energy to do the work. So the option was, don't do the work and not hand in the essay, and then I've wasted $10,000 on this module, or pull up your boots and whatever and go and lock yourself away and do the work. And that meant saying no to friends, saying no to social activities. But at the end of it, I handed it in and I finished it. And I went to graduation this year, you know? And so failure there were times when I failed along the journey in terms of the reading. Had I done all the reading for the module? I hadn't done it in the time that was allocated. So you're given 12 weeks. 6 weeks of that, I was busy doing everything else. And then I had to try and catch up with myself. And then I had to try and write about all the stuff that I was doing. So failure in the sense that I didn't organize myself well enough to be able to knock this thing out of the park and produce a really brilliant essay that everybody, you know, that I would get a distinction. I could have done that if I had been a lot more focused and maybe carved out 3 hours a day to just do this. But I didn't do that. And so I found myself playing catch up at the end of it. But I still managed to pursue and finish and graduate. So I guess I use that as an example of, in the middle of that journey, there were many failures. There were many things that I didn't do right. But I kept thinking about this. Okay, what am I learning about myself? What am I learning about the reading? What am I learning about this thing that I'm meant to be writing about? And how am I then going to apply this to then move me closer towards getting the second master's?
Wow. How did you feel when you finally succeeded? Do you automatically go to the failure and how it has helped you? Or did you feel like you deserved every bit of it? Was it something that you struggled with, or?
The achievement?
The achievement. When you finally got it, which one was louder to you? The failures that you went through or the times where you succeeded?
So when I got my marks, I actually wanted a distinction, and I only got a merit. And so what came to me was, if I had better organized myself, I would have got a distinction. But I only got a merit, which is fantastic for somebody who's doing this thing from Fiji with work and everything else. But what came to me when I got the results was, I should have, if I'd only worked a little bit harder and organized myself a little bit better, the distinction was a possibility. And I kind of missed the distinction because I wasn't kind of carving out time. I could have been a little bit more organized. And maybe that's being too hard on myself. But I think as somebody who's always focused on the growth component of the journey, the reflection was, okay, this is great, you've done it, you've completed it, but if you had been a bit more organized and a bit more structured in how you'd applied yourself to the work, you could have quite easily got a distinction. So that's, my mind went to that. But I think that's because I'm like a bit of a growth junkie, and I'm always looking for opportunities to grow. And that's shaped the way that I respond to failure. Because I'm always looking at, okay, is that the best that I could have done? Or could I have done more?
Okay. For those that are watching today and hearing everything about how failure can be beneficial for you, let's say a university student who's talking about wanting to achieve something and taking care of their parents, giving back to society. And if, I'm not saying glorifying failure, but counting failure as a friend, does that justify them as being, like when they're being mediocre? When they're being mediocre and they're like, okay, it's fine, because if I fail, that's okay. I shouldn't be too hard on myself. What do you say to those type of mentality?
So I think, there's a beautiful poem called Mr. and Miss Average. And it's in one of the Maxwell books, The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. And because you've mentioned it, I really just want to read it, if that's
Please,
okay.
go for it.
But it's beautiful in the sense that it challenges the mediocre thinking. And it challenges the way that we see ourselves in terms of being average. And it's a poem about Mr. and Miss Average, and I'm going to read it. So average is what the failures claim to be when their family and friends ask them why they are not more successful. Average is the top of the bottom, the best of the worst, the bottom of the top, the worst of the best. Which of these are you? Average means being run-of-the-mill, mediocre, insignificant, and also ran a non-entity. Being average is the lazy person's cop-out. It's lacking the guts to take a stand in life. It's living by default. Being average is to take up space for no purpose, to take the trip through life but never to pay the fare, to return no interest for God's investment in you. Being average is to pass one's life away with time rather than to pass one's time away with life. It's to kill time rather than to work it to death. To be average is to be forgotten once you pass from this life. The successful are remembered for their contributions. The failures are remembered because they tried. But the average, the silent majority, is just forgotten. To be average is to commit the greatest crime one can against oneself, humanity, and one's God. The saddest epitaph is this: here lies Mr. and Miss Average. Here lies the remains of what might have been, except for their belief that they were only average.
It's funny because while you're reading it, in my mind, it's like, I'm getting attacked. I feel like Anna's attacking me with this poem. But this is kind of like the people's mentality when they're going through life. I'm okay with where I am right now.
Yeah.
I could do more.
Yeah.
I could do better. But I'm living my life and I'm okay.
Yeah.
Explain that poem to those that have got those type of mentality.
Yeah, and I think, it really comes down to what are you willing to do with what you've been given, and how are you going to use what you've been given and multiply it and be a blessing to the world and use the gifts that you've got to impact not just in your generation, but the generations to come. And now we're talking legacy. But every single one of us carries a unique DNA. There's something that you can do that no one else can do. And when you're playing average, you're not allowing that potential to fully develop. You're basically suppressing it because you're trying to fit into the box that everybody has created for you.
Wow.
And you're really not giving yourself an opportunity to step out of that box and to lean in to what you know you're good at doing. And that's what it means to be average, to just lay back and let life happen to you as opposed to allow life to happen for you. And when life is happening for you, you're looking at the failures as they come and you're looking at, okay, what has this come to teach me? It's come to teach me something, and I'm going to learn the lesson so I can grow, so I can move away from where I find myself right now. Or if you're average, you just let it happen and then you blame everybody else. Look what you've done to me. Woe is me. My parents never had any money. My parents, you can blame everything. And you just end up blaming everybody instead of taking responsibility, which is one of the components of failing forward. Do you blame or do you take responsibility? Like if I were to blame everybody for what's happened in my life's journey, I would not be where I am today. I'd be thinking about dysfunctional family, all the things that happened in my life, and I'd be like, it was my parents' fault. I was raised, when we came back from England, when I was little, we were taken to the village. It's everybody in the village's fault. It's, and not taking any responsibility. But because when I became a student of leadership and a student of personal development, I decided that I was going to take responsibility for where I am. And that's the opportunity that's open to everybody. Are you going to take responsibility and decide not to be average? Or are you going to blame everybody else and remain average?
Wow. A couple of things I wanna read, and this is in the notes that we were talking about. The difference between failing backwards and failing forward.
Yeah.
You just mentioned about blaming others. That is on the failing backwards. For people that are failing backwards, they blame others. But people that are failing forward, they take responsibility. Failing backwards, repeating the same mistakes. Failing forward, learning from each mistake. Failing backwards is expecting never to fail again. And failing forward is knowing failure is part of the progress. I want to focus on that because I feel like that's quite important for people who, when they are navigating through life, sometimes they are so, for lack of a better word, up themselves that they think that, I expect that I'm never going to fail again. But you have to have the wisdom to know that failure is part of the progress. Tell us about that.
Yeah, failure is definitely part of the progress, and I think when you say that, people are so kind of up themselves, or you think so much of yourself that you think you're never going to fail. And one of the things that I learned from being a student of leadership is one of the things that Maxwell said from the stage when I first went to one of the Maxwell events, in Orlando to go and get certified as a speaker. And one of the things so what we were given to do, and I'm going to share this story because I think it responds to your question. What we were given to do, we were given an opportunity to prepare a 5-minute speech before we even went into the room. And so you're agonizing over what your 5-minute speech is going to be like, whether people are going to like it, and whether people are going to even listen to you. And so prior to going, all your energy is taken up thinking about what am I going to say in this 5-minute speech to a room full of complete strangers. You're only meant to do it around the table. There's about 10 people at a table. Everybody stands up to give a 5-minute speech. What I loved about that whole exercise is when it was all over, then Maxwell stands from the stage and speaks to us. And one of the things he said was, if you came into this room and all you were worried about was your speech, you were worried about what your hair looked like, you were worried about what people thought of you, he said, I've got news for you. Get over yourself because this is not about you.
Say that last line again. Get over yourself.
Get over yourself because this is not about you. You have a message to deliver to the world. Get out there and do what you need to do. And get over yourself because this is not about you. Wow. So bringing that back to the discussion around failure, it's recognizing that failure is a necessary part of the process through this thing called life. And when you take risks, like you put yourself out like what we're doing now, to be on a podcast, it's going to be shared to everybody who wants to watch it. You're also opening yourself up to criticism. And you're opening yourself up to people to throw stones at you. But this thing is the message. Get over yourself because this is not about you. And so failure is a part of the process. And it's part of you putting yourself out there to add value to people. You taking risks which are bigger than you. And that's the way that you need to recognize that this is what it is. So you're always going to fail. Every time you take on a risk and do something new, there will be something in it that will make you reflect on how you're doing things and may even draw attention to you which you don't really want. I think about these beautiful young women who are part of this Miss Fiji pageant at the moment. They put themselves out there in the public eye, and people sometimes can be really nasty, But I love that they're seeing the platform as an opportunity to add value, to talk about the things that they're passionate about, to remind us not to throw your rubbish all over the place. They're really using the platform to encourage everyone who's watching them to do good for our nation. And that's what happens when you put yourself out there. But there's still failure in it because you might say the wrong thing. You might be seen to be like not Fijian enough, you know, you're saksaka and all these kinds of things which people look at you and say. But when you realize that it's not about you, but you have a message to deliver to the world, then that's how you continue to be encouraged to show up.
Why do you think leaders take it personally when they fail? Because I feel like in this life, especially those that are following, they put leaders up on a pedestal that when they fail, they get disappointed because they know that probably I look up to this person. This is someone that I count as a role model in my life. And if they fail, then we sort of put them up on a pedestal like they're gods.
Yeah.
And when they don't really, when they fail, or when they don't achieve whatever the goals that they have for themselves, we tend to feel like this is not the type of leadership I want to be under. And don't you think that that is a lot of pressure for leaders to act a certain way and feel like failure is not something that they would want to be associated with? Because I know that there are people that's looking up to me. If I fail, they will feel the full brunt of it as well. And ultimately, they would want to leave me and go to another leadership that is not failing. I think that's kind of like a dilemma in the world that we live in. I just want to know how we navigate through that, because I feel like those that are listening today, leaders who want to take notes and get some golden nuggets out of this conversation, how should they act or how should they carry themselves when they know that failure is part of life, but also there are people that is following them, that's looking to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's a question that every leader, I'm sure spends many sleepless nights really thinking about how people perceive them and how people expect them to show up. And then when things happen that are not in alignment of what people expect of you, how people then respond to you and see you as a failure. One of the things I love about the mentors that I follow who are leadership experts is authenticity and vulnerability.
Oh, like that.
And that to me is the mark of an incredible leader. No one expects leaders to be perfect, but we expect leaders to be authentic and to be real. And it's when the leader tries to cover up and pretend that they're perfect, that people who are looking at you, who can already see the things that you're not perfect at, and they're waiting for you to own it, but you're acting like you've got it all together, when in fact you don't. And the leaders that I admire the most are the ones who are able to be authentic and vulnerable about their journey and the lessons that they're learning in the middle of the journey. So yes, I'm a leader positionally, but I don't have it all together, which is why I need you to help me navigate this thing. And I need you to hold me accountable, because these are the things that we've decided that we're doing as an organization. And if I'm not doing it, then I need you, my inner circle, to challenge me. And I'm going to own it, but I'm owning it because of my leadership position, and I'm going to be real and tell you this is where I've gone wrong, but thank you for bringing it to my attention, and this is what I'm going to do, and now can we all move forward together? And that to me is the difference. Like, if you're authentic and you're real, people will follow you regardless of the failure.
Wow, that's deep.
But I think it's when you pretend that you're some kind of perfect leader and people can read the imperfections and they can see the imperfections and they know that you're not a perfect leader, but you're acting like you are. And they're like, no. This thing, what do they say? Warni sota. Yeah, something here is not, it doesn't quite fit. And that's, I think, where leaders lose followers.
Can everyone become a leader? Or should everyone become a leader? Because I feel like we've been conditioned to think that only certain people can lead. Can anyone lead?
I think it comes down to how you see what leadership is. What do you define as leadership? And that's one of the things I love about the Maxwell philosophy, because he defines leadership as really influence. And he says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Which means every single person, they say every single person in this world, regardless of how introverted they might be, will influence at least 10,000 people in their lifetime. And that's one of the books that Maxwell wrote. So the most introverted person is still going to influence at least 10,000 people in their lifetime.
Wow.
That's what they say. That's what the research says. So if leadership is influence, and everyone, regardless of whether you're an introvert, even if you're an introvert, will have that level of influence, then everyone is already a leader. So people, as you navigate and as you come into life, even as you become teenagers, and as they have a level of influence over their siblings. So leading, if leadership is influence, then they're leading. Moms leading their children, school teachers leading students in a classroom, other children leading other children, peers leading one another. So the question is, should everybody become a leader? Everybody has a level of influence. The question is, how are you using the influence that you have for the good?
Okay.
And how are you using it to then even to grow yourself and to contribute and to move yourself out of being average to being successful?
There's a difference between failing backwards and failing forward, and that is thinking I'm a failure and believing something didn't work. So it speaks to mindset.
Yeah.
How important is mindset when it comes to leadership?
Mindset is everything, yeah? Mindset is absolutely everything when it comes to leadership, and particularly when it comes to navigating failure. So I think we talked about this in our last conversation, when something happens, you don't internalize the failure, and then you make it, I am the failure, I'm a failure because this thing has happened. But it's something that's happened, so you separate yourself from the failure, from the actual event, whatever the event might be. And you're able to look at yourself by navigating your mind and telling yourself, I'm not a failure, it's just that this particular event hasn't worked out the way that I expected it to be. But that does not reflect who I am.
Whoa. I want to know the art of detaching yourself from the event. For example, something that I've got a goal that I've set out for myself, and I am going to achieve it regardless of what happens, and I've put in my mind time and effort and energy in it. How do you detach yourself from it when you've given it everything you've got? And then when it comes to failure, when you said that you have to switch your mind, that you have to detach from it, it's not easy. How do you do that?
Get over yourself, because it's not about you.
Okay. Yeah, somehow I feel like I was going to get... Yeah, okay, great. That is the end of this conversation. But that is so true.
Yeah.
Say it again.
Get over yourself, because it's not about you. And recognize that whatever's happened has come to teach you something. And so, it might be a failure, something that you've invested in which hasn't worked out. What do you learn from it, and how do you then take the lessons that the experience has come to teach you and push yourself through? Because they always say you learn from experience. But then why do people have the same experiences over and over again? They're not learning anything. It's the evaluation of the experience that teaches you something that then helps you to move on. So you have this investment that you've put yourself into something. You've invested all of you into this project, for example. The project fails. What does it teach you about yourself? And how you respond to that, and this goes back to the first quote, will determine whether you move on to the next thing or whether you stay there. And your response, which is your mindset, is if you come to this and say, okay, this is not about me, but what I've learned from this project is I need to do this differently. I need to put more boundaries in. I need to manage the resources better. There's some things that I need to do better in order to then move on to the next thing.
Lastly, the difference between failing backwards and failing forward is quitting, and failing forward is preserving.
Persevering.
Persevering.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so do you quit? Do you just decide that I'm going to give this up because it's too hard?
True.
Or do you decide I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning and I'm going to go at it again? You know, and one of the things I love about one of the lessons which I've learned as a student of leadership, and this is the Maxwell team talk about this all the time, is that give yourself a 24-hour, it's called the 24-hour rule. So you give yourself 24 hours to lament a loss or to celebrate a win. When the 24 hours is over, get over it, move on to the next thing. Yesterday ended last night. You know, so if you're thinking about quitting, you're quitting because you're overwhelmed by what's happened to you. But if you give yourself 24 hours to like cry, okay, like this thing should have happened a little bit differently. We've lost whatever we've lost from this process. Learn the lesson and decide that I'm going to persevere and I'm going to come back tomorrow, or I'm going to come back next week and I'm going to do this thing all over again. But this time, learning the lessons that I learned from how the project failed the last time.
Anna, for those that are watching this podcast, we've talked about failure. Of course, we're going to be talking about it again in the next couple of episodes. What is the main message you want them to walk away with? If this is going to be the last episode they will watch. I'm not saying anything negative, but I'm saying if this is the last episode that they're going to watch, what is the main message you want them to walk away with and learn?
I think the main message is what Maxwell says in his book, you know, fail fast, fail first, but always fail forward. So when you're navigating through life, there's going to be failures. But if you're looking at failure as, okay, let me do this quickly, let me just do this, let me take the risk, let me fail. Fail fast, fail first, so you're always putting failure as something, okay, it's got to get it out of the way first. I'm going to mess up, let's do it, get it out of the way, but always fail forward. So the failing forward is because you've learned the lessons and that it's taking you to where you need to get to. So it's not actually a failure, but it's a friend.
Wow.
And see failure as your friend, come to teach you things and come to help you to get to where you're meant to be in this thing called life.
Our next episode is going to be still on failure, but the subject is your past holding your life hostage? Why do you think that's important? Without giving away too much, of course, people are going to watch us again next week, but give us a little snippet of what people can expect.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. How much of your past are you still is holding you back right now? Is it holding you hostage? And we know hostage situations is where you can't move because you're being held back. So, you know, as your past experiences and things that you've encountered in life holding you back from, you know, becoming who you've been designed to be and from discovering the fullness of the potential that you carry.
Looking forward to our next podcast episode on this Leaders Lead podcast presented by SALT.
Looking forward to it too, Te. Thank you. It's been excellent, yeah, Vinakan.